Hey, Adni fam, it is Anthony. I am thrilled to be joined by Nicole Cox today, who is the co founder of Anders Group. Anders Group is a healthcare staffing agency that staffs both nurses and allied health professionals nationwide. And they were actually just voted as one of the best healthcare staffing agencies in America, which I was so excited about. And congratulations, Nicole, on that award. Super excited to jump into learning about Nicole's story as well as Anders Group. But yes, Nicole, thank you so much for being on the Adni Huddle podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yay, for sure. And maybe we could just start by learning a little bit more about you and your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yes, I'd love to jump into it. So, 2006, I started my recruiting career and I graduated out of school. I became a recruiter and I had no idea what that meant, right? First job out of school, I was a business major, so I jumped into recruiting and quickly got my feet wet. It was a lot to learn about healthcare. I just didn't have a background where I'd experienced it a lot. And so just trying to dive into what the role was, how to help serve. At the beginning, you're just asking anybody and everybody to help represent. And then the job becomes just so incredible. You do build those friendships with travelers, and I really believe if you serve them well, then they feel that and they'll refer. And then it just transformed into now it's almost a 20-year career, which is crazy. I'm very grateful for it. Started as a recruiter, and then in 2010, our company was bought by a really big company, and it just changed. I was so lucky to start with a company that was like the family feel. Like we knew all the travelers' names, and we talked about them. This person needs a job, working together, and we were bought by a really large company, and it just changed. Not necessarily bad, just wasn't my style, not my vibe. I loved the personal touch. And so that's when my partner Josh and I decided, let's go do it. Let's go try it out. And thankfully, we had some incredible friends and travelers that believed in us early on and championed us as they traveled. And we just kept trying that rinse and repeat, treat people well, work hard. We can't necessarily control the external job market, what jobs are there, what may happen, but how can we serve best and give them the best experience possible?
I love that. It's so amazing that you started your career actually as a recruiter, like boots on the ground, and kind of got that experience like working with travelers before you actually started your own healthcare staffing agency. And speaking of that, would love to learn more about Anders. Just learn more about its values, learn more about how it works. I saw you guys are nationwide, which is so awesome. So yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Anders.
Yeah, we pride ourselves on being the boutique agency. So we say boutique on purpose. We, of course, want to grow. Every company does, but we sure want to do it the right way. We believe in technology and appreciate that support, but I feel like when you are traveling nationwide, you want that anchor, that person that's your support system. And so we just really want to serve our travelers in the best way possible. We know they're doing a lot, right? The healthcare world, your day to day is a lot different than a recruiter's on what you see and what you face. And so if we can make that a little bit easier, provide that support system, we want to live by those values of really understanding that role and also having a little bit of fun, right? You're traveling, you're going to cool new places, you're meeting new people. By being a recruiter for 20 years, nobody's ever traveled that long, right? So I've gotten to see a lot of people have some neat career choices where they ended up permanent places they never thought they would be, or they had this adventure and went back home.
Nicole, one thing that stood out to me as we met and talked about Anders and kind of your career, I think it really stood out to me how many stories you had about travelers that you've worked with. Like, this traveler's car got stolen, or this traveler stayed with me because they didn't have a house yet because their contract just started. Like, so many kind of unique stories. And that really stood out to me just because I feel like something that is so important in healthcare staffing is really that kind of relationship you're able to build with the traveler and ensure that your healthcare workers feel supported while, they're on contract and off. So maybe you could just share a little bit more about some of those experiences you've had and how you feel like it's shaped how you've built Anders today.
Yeah, I'm grateful early on. I just really understood friendships and that appreciation can also be in the workplace, right? I really appreciated my travelers that they trusted me, somebody they've never really met in person. They're leaving their permanent home and traveling maybe to Hawaii based on a conversation with me. And so just understanding how I would feel in their shoes and trying to relate to them and build that trust. And then with that, the fun part comes, you do get to know somebody when you're talking to them every single week, right? That's the fun part for me is I find value in getting to know other people. I think hopefully most recruiters are like that. We're people. I love to talk. Unfortunately for anybody around me, it's a long conversation most of the time, but leaning into it, it was just fun. And so there's so many stories along the way of, when we start Anders Group, those travelers that just championed me and believed in me and referred to anybody and everybody they could. Those travelers, I mean, so many are dear friends now. We're sending holiday cards 10 years after they traveled, right? They know my family. They've seen me grow up. They know my kids. We've had a lot of life happen, right? I've had
Yeah.
cancer twice. I've had the kiddo with the
Oh,
accident.
wow.
So not only do I appreciate my healthcare team at all those places, they've seen my travelers have been with me on that journey. And so just doing this together, feeling like it's a team, that's what makes me want to go to work every day. I think there's a million different ways to work, but this
Yeah.
time we have is short, and so to come every day and smile and enjoy it, treat others with kindness, that's kind of the impact I would want to leave on the world around me.
That's so beautiful. I thank you for sharing that. It really resonates so much with like my personal values and belief and how we built Adni and just kind of having that human factor a part of the healthcare staffing process. I'm curious to your perspective, like what impact do you feel like that has for Anders, for the travelers that you've worked with to really build that trust and rapport? What's the impact of having those relationships with your travelers in terms of everyone's experience being better?
I think we grow together, right? I think by them enjoying travel, they're meeting their own personal goals financially with new locations. Then for us, we're growing as a team. And so I don't know how we grow without that. And so I'm very thankful. We really try to instill that with everybody on our team, understanding the why. Our recruiter team is specifically the first thing they are told to ask a traveler is, why do you want to travel? And I want to get to know you, right? That is the
Yeah.
only question we need to ask when we first connect. Yes, I want to tell you about the job and I want to understand your job search, but if I don't know you and what's motivating you, I don't know how I could help serve you.
I love that. No, that's so well said and definitely makes such an impact from like the traveler experience as well and like feeling trusted. And as you said, like, you might be traveling to a new city and you'd only seen, a document that you signed or it was just a few phone calls. So having that trust and actually getting to know who you're working with, I think is so important. And I think something that I'm seeing in the industry is becoming more important again. I think during the pandemic, it was like just there was so much chaos and everyone was just trying to like staff and get contracts signed. I feel like it kind of lost some of that human touch because it was just like there was so much going on at once. Do you feel like there has been that transition post pandemic? Like, I'm curious, like your thoughts on like comparing like the pandemic of being a healthcare traveler to now, both in that kind of trust and relationship build element, but then also in terms of the pay. And I think we're definitely seeing a big shift in the market, kind of a come down maybe from like some of those crazy COVID rates. So curious to hear your perspective about the juxtaposition between those two times.
Yeah, so we call it the COVID recruiter, where it was just how fast can you go, right? People didn't, I mean, I had candidates, I'll learn your name once you place me, like it was just busy roll, let's go, chase the contracts. But it was also a scary time, right? The rates were high, but I felt like it was well deserved. We were sending, hopefully, thankfully, we didn't necessarily send in trash bags, but you saw some of these facilities, how they were staffing. It was a tough time. But now that it has stabilized, it's adjusting to what, to me, recruiting used to be. I don't feel like it's any different. I think people new to this space are feeling it, that you do need trust, right? They have their choice of who they want to work with. And if you're not providing that support, one thing I love about our company is we have a clinical liaison that introduces themselves the first week of the contract. Like, I am
Oh,
just here to
nice.
support you. If you just need to talk to somebody, if you have questions, just a person to talk to, right? So as much as I've been through all the things and been around nurses, right, I can't necessarily answer that question. And so having them immediately be just an ally on top of me to ask those clinical questions. And so it has been a weird season post-COVID. I feel like facilities are kind of, they paid a lot for travelers. It was great, well deserved, but I think they're trying to kind of structure themselves. How do they figure this out to make it to the other side? And so the rates have dropped, right? Some, but it's working together on that. I think what's really helped me is I'm type A. I like the way to know how things work, and so I think that served me as well. As I don't feel like there's a huge secret on how agencies pay travelers, right? We list all the perks on our website, housing, but I try to explain where that comes from, where there is a bill rate, an agency fee, and the rest is you pay a traveler. And so as a company, we have a set margin. We don't want to feel like somebody has to negotiate with us. That would not make me happy, vice versa. Right, we still negotiate. We negotiate with the facility because I also joke my travelers are not products at Target, right? They're going to have different experiences. The locations are going to have different demands. So we definitely can have conversations with the facility. Can we get a higher rate for this or that or whatever it might be? But I think knowing how I'll show you what that rate is. This is what it is. Here's the margin. Here's what all agencies like some sort of pie or cake analogy, but here is what we can pay. Here's how I think we should break it down for your needs, right? Stipends, tax-free, whatever that might be. And we work together. So I just think it's really helped by educating on the front end and not making it feel like, hey, used car salesman, by empowering. I think your healthcare professionals are obviously educated to be in the roles they are. And so by explaining it and working together, it then becomes like me and my traveler trying to find the best experience for them. Like we feel like a team. Again, they shouldn't feel like they're negotiating with me. My joke I always say is I'd pay $1 million if I could bill $1 million, right? But there is that rate limit. And if the facility somehow can't match whatever our needs are, we keep trucking together, right? And so it's a team and feeling like, again, another analogy I like is we are your realtor when you're on the housing search, right? There's a lot of services that are tech only. You don't have to have a realtor, to each their own, right? But when I bought my house, I really like somebody to help explain the things. This should be something we need to look at. We need to advocate for guaranteed hours, whatever it might be, notice period. These are the things we can negotiate and we should. And having that person to help you, or when the thing goes wrong, right? The car gets stolen or whatever, something happens back home and you need to get back home, right? These are the human side of it that you need to talk to somebody for. And so we hope to be that anchor and just really pride myself in what we do. And I hope that speaks through.
I love all of that. So many great points made. Wanted to circle around to kind of this education component and like how does a healthcare staffing agency, make revenue? Like how do you actually make money from travelers and how does that kind of flow of money work? Would love to kind of understand that a bit more for anyone who doesn't understand, especially words like margins or rates. Could you kind of break that down a little bit more for the
Yeah, so
listeners?
most travelers we're going to bill an hourly rate for, right? So facility itself, every now and then you'll see like in Alaska maybe give us housing because there's none. There's literally none, right? But most hospitals are paying agencies an all-inclusive hourly rate. We bill per hour a traveler works. They don't necessarily are concerned with how far you've traveled, what your housing needs are, right? So my job as an agency is to get that number as big as possible, right? I want that number as big as possible. And then we have our cost margin. So as an agency, we have our costs, right? Payroll taxes, liability, insurance, the recruiters, the compliance team, compliance costs, right? And so that's where the finance team figures out the margin. And then we have the profit on top of that, right? So that's going to be our set margin as a company. I think monthly analyze with competitors, like, are we on par? Do we need to find efficiencies? We say we don't necessarily want to be the low cost provider because we do have to pay recruiters, right? We can't be that tech only company, but we want to be on par. So are there efficiencies, right? You're seeing like job boards, how awesome that they can get jobs out in front. Those cost money, right? So those are the costs we evaluate. And then we have the pie left for the traveler. So say for easy math, it's maybe $70 an hour, right? You may put a portion of that into the taxable category. We have to pay you taxable wages, right? And then we'll divide it up if you're eligible for stipends. I'm not necessarily the decider on that, right? IRS is the one that ultimately decides. So that can always be a sticky concept for agencies. Like, we don't want to give too much advice because we never want to say the wrong thing and get somebody in trouble. And so we always say, like, you have to refer to a tax accountant. This is to the best of our knowledge, but we'll put a portion of that into stipends. So that can be meals or housing. Housing we can set up. Nowadays, most travelers set up their own housing, whereas when I first started, nobody did. because with things like Furnished Finder, Airbnbs, Verbo, I used to say VRBO, now it sounds like that's wrong and hides my age. But you can find ways to make housing cheaper because you got a pie, and the less you spend on housing, the more the traveler can take home. And so that's where we'll work together. We'll tell you that pie every contract. Like, this is the pie, this is how we broke it down. Does that pie work? Can we try to negotiate more with the facility? Do we need to look at a different facility? Like, what are your expectations, and doing the best we can? Did that help me
Makes
answer?
a lot of sense. Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
so a great crash course, if you will, on how it
Yeah.
works.
It's so hard
Um,
over the phone always because I want to do the graphics and
yeah. It's
numbers.
like we need the whiteboard. We need the whiteboard.
Yeah, it's always an interesting, but I mean, I'm usually like, I advocate our team. Like, the first time we connect, we try to talk through that because I don't understand why that's not super known, right? Like,
Yeah.
why aren't we all saying this, right? The agency, again, we need that bill rate to be able to pay. And the bigger the bill rate, the more we can pay.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, like for anyone out there that's listening that maybe isn't currently a healthcare traveler, but thinking about it is, kind of actively interested in traveling, but maybe they're just having some second thoughts or they're nervous or, they just have seen so much on social media that has maybe just made them a little fearful of working with agencies or really going for it. What would your advice to them be?
Well, first, I would say it's got to be the right season, right? We, like, when we are connecting with somebody, some people just can't travel, right? I've got two small kiddos. Like, every day is a win. That I showered is like, whew, packing up and moving all the time. It's a lot, right? And so it's got to be where you've got that adventure ready. You're at a life point where you can go. I do think it's finding a good recruiter, right? It's kind of going back to that realtor analogy. I don't think most people pick a realtor based on, like, I want to use Ebby. They're picking it based on somebody that they really feel trusted and support and can be their anchor as they travel around. And so I would assume most people that are posting had a hard recruiter experience, right? Because I've had contracts that haven't gone well, and it's not typically something that's viewed as like an agency, right? Right? We've tried to prepare for everything up front, and if that weird curveball comes, they're telling me the second it happens, and we're talking through it and we're figuring it out, right? Because some facilities need travelers because they're not the best place to work, right? And if that ever happens, we're having that communication right away. Because if somebody hates their first travel contract, they're not traveling again, right? And as much as I want to represent you for one 13-week contract, I mean, agencies pride themselves on retention and wanting to continue to travel. And so, first it's got to be the right season, and then it's finding that person that you're like, this is who I'm going to roll with, right? Talking to other people in the industry that are enjoying it, having the good stories, not the horror stories. And then just figuring out that we usually talk about, like, what are motives? Like, do we want pay? Do we want location? The traveler's the driver. I work for them. They have their choice of agency, and I'm going to do everything possible. If it's out there, I'll find it. I always say I can't make up a job. I can't make them pay $1 million an hour, right? But if it exists, I will do everything to help them find it. And that's when I think that adventure it's a lot of fun. I sure would hope most of my travelers are all saying it was a really cool season of their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to explore, new friends to be made. And yeah, I think it's a really unique life experience as well to kind of go to a city where you maybe have never lived before. And I think that it's really the unique experience of a healthcare traveler. And then
I
I
also feel
think,
like a lot of my travelers are really satisfied on the end of traveling in a sense that when they go permanent, sometimes you'll hear people, I just took the first job out of school, it was nearby, right? And so I feel like those that have traveled, they see a lot. They see good and bad managers, they see good and bad systems, they have seen different locations. And so when they do pick that place to kind of anchor, usually they're super satisfied because they got to lure them away from travel. So hopefully they're getting a pretty good pay package. They are seeing the things they liked in contracts. And so I also joke a lot of my old travelers are running something, starting something. They've had enough experience that it elevates who they are and how they can interact with people. And so they're usually commanding those leadership or starting a clinic, whatever it might be. They're doing things outside the box on the other side. And so it's been a neat piece of that puzzle for them by traveling.
absolutely, it's definitely a really unique experience, and there's a lot of value to kind of be generated from it. And then just thinking about like the healthcare staffing market more broadly, I'm curious from your kind of expertise of the market, what do you feel like the next 5 years looks like. Like, where do you see kind of healthcare staffing in 5 years, whether that be agencies or, really just like the industry as a whole?
Tech will still come into play, right? You see that it's hard to find people. And so you're seeing facilities try to lean into it. Staffing companies are leaning into it. You're hearing these agencies that have 150 travelers per recruiter. Like, I've joked, like, how can you know that many people's names at one time, let alone they're working with you, right? So you're seeing tech play into it. And so for us, it's tech, but still keeping our uniqueness. The demand will be there, right? Healthcare, there's a need, but we've got to figure out how to pull people into it again, right? This kind of frustration with healthcare. I mean, we went from heroes to it feels like not, and I don't understand it, right? I've had the journeys with my healthcare professionals. They are my heroes. Like, my bad day is, oh, that job didn't come together, right? It's very different than a bad day in that space, right? And so figuring out, how do we pay better, right? How do facilities earn more so then they can pay agencies more, thus we can pay travelers more? Because I think that was kind of an interesting concept too during COVID, is agencies really got to look out on rates. And I'm like, man, we shrunk our margins. Like, we didn't need as high of a margin if the rate's bigger to pay our travelers more, right? And so if we can get higher bill rates to the agency, I'm not saying per se agencies need more, but like, the bigger that rate is to us, we can shrink our margin, pay our travelers more, right? And so then it'll generate the need we have. But we're just pushing people out. They're not the thank yous, the gratefulness. I feel like those that have done it right, you're seeing it rocket, and those facilities are great to work for. But it's just leaning into that. There's always going to be demand, right? It's just, we cannot get enough people into that space. And so I always joke, great job security, there's always a need, but you're seeing burnout and getting frustrated and not feeling that appreciation. And it is a really hard day. So how does that make sense to keep people in that space? Because we have to have them, right? They're my heroes. Yeah. They've saved my son. I think I've shared with you that story of my son having a really hard medical journey, and just there's just nothing like that, the team that supports you in that. And as much as I want to do recruiting, it'll never make an impact compared to that, right? What they did for our family and how they saved us.
That was actually my next question. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to share. I think that's another part of your story that really stood out to me, was how, you really saw healthcare not just from the recruiter lens, but also from the parent, the patient perspective. And I think that, anyone who's had to go through anything like that in healthcare, it definitely makes a big impact in kind of how you view the world, life, but, also healthcare workers and kind of their role. So I'm curious kind of if you're willing to share just kind of how your patient journey as a parent made an impact in how you kind of viewed healthcare workers and how you kind of viewed the ways that Anders was being built and the values that you guys believe in.
I say as a family, it was the best, worst thing to happen to us, right? So early recruiting, I know I'm helping, but you're kind of invincible, 20s, early 30s, right? And I was very grateful I hadn't dealt with a lot of that kind of healthcare world and seeing that direct impact. And then I had the son that had the medical journey, right? He was very, very sick. He was on life support 21 days. We were in hospitals for months. And wow, it sure changed, right? You just see, the nurses that are not only caring for my son, but for caring for me. They were, like the toothbrush appears and you're like, I didn't have that when I didn't expect to spend that time there. And you'd see the nurse that snuck it in for you, or they ordered lunch and they made sure there was a little bit more for us. And so for me, it was like, these are the people. Like, this is just amazing what they're doing and how they support and love families. And so it just impacted it. You understand what you're doing, right? This is not, I'm putting a person in a job. I'm putting in a person in a job that can have tremendous impact. And I need to take pride in that and help serve that and make that the best fit possible. And so my full circle moment that I shared with you is, we had that long journey and met a lot of incredible people that supported us. And I am a recruiter, so I make them all talk to me, right? So on the other side of it, we're all friends and we stay in touch. And one of my son's nurses ended up wanting to travel, and she traveled for our company, and talk about the ultimate full circle moment of, literally crying at her feet, kind of doing all the things that you're pleading as a mom, like, is he going to be okay? And then she took that contract in Dallas. Housing falls through, so she stays with us. And we're sitting there having coffee, and I'm like, man, our son's playing right next to us. I probably should have said that. He's totally okay and full miracle thanks to the care he received. But he's sitting there fine. You know, she's traveling with us, and I'm like, man, life throws you curveballs you don't expect, right? And there is going to be good out of the bad. And it changed me in all ways of life, of appreciating every day. I understand travelers wanting to have great assignments, like make the most of it. Who knows how long that season is? We need to find the best job possible. We need to make sure you're finding joy from it. I need to make your day better, right? Life is hard enough without people getting in the way, saying the extra thank yous and care and appreciation. Really, I think my healthcare travelers know more than anybody. A normal day is a pretty awesome day, and that gets lost on a lot of people. And so, again, best worst thing to happen to us. I'm very grateful for that experience and that it changed me who I am. Obviously, I wish that upon nobody and learn through my lesson and don't have the journey like me. But just really grateful every day. Full circle there too, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Nicole. It's a super, super powerful story, and I'm so sorry that your family had to go through that. But I think that there are so many like beautiful lessons, and it's just so wild how things come full circle, and life can be so
I'll
serendipitous,
never,
and
like, the
it's
bad
just
stuff
so
happens.
wild. That is like such a crazy story, and I think it again is so challenging that you went through that, but I think it from an outsider listening, it really shows like the genuine values of Anders, and I think the incredible agency you've built to really support travelers and really make sure that they have the support they need, on and off contract, and how much you and your team care for them. So definitely shows, and it's really
Honored
exciting
to
what you're
help
building.
her.
And congratulations on everything you've built. I know as a founder myself, it is not easy to build a company. There's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of, roller coaster that happens. But I mean, here you
But you
are,
like
like
what you
winning
like. Well, that's a
recognition.
new one. I didn't picture that happening today. That's a new problem,
It's
but we'll figure it
crazy.
out. That was interesting.
There's always a new problem, actually. Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, even if you do it years over years, there's always a new thing that comes up. Um, so we always end the podcast with the same question for everyone, which is really just kind of what this podcast is all about, and rehumanizing healthcare staffing. Bringing that human element back, and I think really it's as we've seen in this conversation, I think that kind of human touch has come up a lot in the conversation. So would love to hear from you why you believe that rehumanizing healthcare staffing is more important maybe now than ever before.
Because the world is so not human now, right? We hear AI in this space and technology, but in those moments of healthcare and needing support, it is just as important to have the person there. So it's only fair that the staffing company does the same in return, right? What
Yeah.
nurses do is not just the technology piece, right? They're supporting, they're caring, and I'm gonna lean on. That's how I want to grow as a company, right? To each their own. I wish I had that tech savvy brain that could do it, and it's all different numbers, and that's just not who I am. I don't want to pretend to be that. Yes, we lean into technology. Don't get me wrong. I'm not still using the fax machine. I mean, I could, but like I'm not. But I just think it's so important that in this world of online and hiding, to remember that piece of it. You can still advance technologically wise when having the person behind it, right? I feel like sometimes I tease like people's kind of weird comments they used to make online, like they kind of say in real life, and you're like, a thank you would have been nice, right? And just appreciating people, and so just
Yeah.
leaning into being people. That's what to me brings me joy. I sure hope to surround myself with others that do as well.
I love that. Well, an amazing way to end the podcast. Thank you, Nicole, so much. And for everyone listening, definitely check out andersgroup.org. I will make sure all the links are in the description of the podcast. But yeah, Nicole, where is the best place for folks to get in touch with Anders, to get in touch with you? How can they connect?
Calling, but okay, we get it. You may want to text or email first. Remember that whole little piece, you gotta talk to us. But they can
Yes.
go to eatersgroup.org and set up a convenient time to talk. But remember that question we're going to ask you, how can we help? Like, why do you want to travel? How can we serve you? So the best way to get into touch is to real life people talk to us, but we can use technology to set that up.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Nicole. Everyone, definitely check out Anders' group. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
I'm so happy to meet you guys and congratulations on all what you're doing and achieving and making an impact.
Yay. Thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye bye.